Hi, welcome to episode 27 of the American Tributaries podcast, where to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in these last few years, we are using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whidden, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe on the channel page and give us a thumbs up on this particular episode. If you're listening on any other podcast platform, please give us a follow and whatever positive rating they provide for. And of course, check us out on Instagram at American Tributaries Podcast. Before we get started with the show, this is an exciting milestone. We have our first sponsor. Episode 27 is sponsored by Duo Plus Cafe, a lovely place in my neighborhood of Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, owned by my friends David Lee and his wife Fang, who's their chef. This dirty matcha latte that I am enjoying here is one of their delicious drinks. Duo Plus Cafe seems to be a perfect first sponsor because these conversations on the podcast are supposed to be casual, extended, curious conversations between two people as if they were having a cup of coffee. So if you're in Brooklyn, please visit Duo Plus Cafe, grab a drink, get some delicious food, and know that you're supporting great local business and some great local people. They're at 272 Court Street, just a few doors down from Union Market. All right, on to the show. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Laura Süpper. Laura and I have known each other and have been good friends since 2012, and she recently embarked on an exciting new chapter in her life. Laura, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing? And could you share a bit of your story?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. My first podcast ever. So a little bit about me. I am in nursing school in my 50s. It's not something I would ever say that I would be doing, but that's what's happening.
What inspired you to make that kind of change?
I guess the story goes back several years. I guess we can talk about the fact that we worked together in the wine industry for, I don't know how many years we worked together, but
it was about 3 years, I think, 2012 to 15, I think.
Okay. So I was one of the co-owners of a boutique wine importing company, Acid Inc. And after doing that for about 10 years, I didn't really know what direction I wanted my life to go in. I had never been in wine before that. I was always in hospitality, public relations, hotel management, restaurant management. And I kind of felt that I wanted my career to take a different direction. I just had no idea which direction I wanted it to go in. And then, the pandemic changed a lot for everybody. And this was something that came to me during the pandemic.
Was it just like the overall experience, or was there something particular in your life at that time that kind of sparked this curiosity about something new like this?
Definitely something particular that happened. So like many others, I lost my jobs when the pandemic hit. Had a lot of time by myself. I'm single and I don't have kids, so I wound up being by myself a lot during the pandemic. And unlike some other people who were stretched too far because they had their kids home or they were taking care of elderly, I definitely felt like I had the capacity to do more. So, I started picking up little local volunteer projects, but I was always kind of looking for a way to contribute more. So when the opportunity came to work at the Jones Beach vaccination program, I jumped on it. Not only it was a paid gig, but it was a way for me to contribute and help get us past this pandemic. So I worked at the Jones Beach vaccination site and also at Javits Center for, I guess, a total of about 6 months. And while I was there, I met all kinds of nurses that encouraged me. They said, "Why don't you go to nursing school? You could do this." So I thought about it. And here I am.
Now, I guess the healthcare system was under tremendous, like a historic strain during the pandemic. So I kind of feel like you were seeing the healthcare profession and nursing, I'm sure, in its very worst state. So like, despite that, you decided that you still wanted to pursue this. I mean, were you getting that vibe, or was that more of a, I mean, like, I don't know, just like a news thing, or just at certain hospitals that were that strained? Or were these nurses that you were talking with, were they actually like really stressed?
Well, there were a couple of nurses before the vaccination site that I knew that were completely stressed and just overtaxed and really struggling with the fact that they were breaking their backs and other people were out and just denying the whole situation, which kind of incensed me. But yeah, the nurses at the vaccination sites, they were all travel nurses and they were loving being in New York. And it was, just another gig for them because they had been moving around all over the country, which was another one of the appealing things for me.
So I've never heard that term, travel nurse. What is that exactly?
So I think you sign up with an agency once you're a licensed nurse, and you go where there's need to different areas of the country. Or certainly during the pandemic, we know that California had a great need, New York had a great need, Washington. So people from states that maybe weren't as affected, traveled here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then
so it's a short-term contract.
Okay, and they get put up with like their hotel or something, or long-term housing?
I'm not sure of the exact details of how they're compensated, but yeah, they were all staying in hotels nearby the Javits Center. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess they get a stipend.
Okay. So, and how far along are you in what's the overall, I guess, timeline for going from not being a nurse to becoming a nurse, and where are you in that timeline?
Well, I have a bachelor's degree already in psychology, so I had several of the prerequisite courses that were needed. I'm in a 2-year program that actually takes 3 years because I had several more prerequisite courses that I had to take before I could enter the candidacy program for registered nursing. So that was what my first year was. It was anatomy, chemistry, statistics, microbiology, community health, things like that. And now I'm in an actual 2-year registered nursing program, and I'll graduate in June of 2024 with my associate's degree in nursing, which allows me to sit for the NCLEX exam and become a registered nurse. And then after that, I will continue kind of like an online program to get my bachelor's of nursing, which will open up a lot more job opportunities because a lot of states are demanding that you have minimum bachelor's degree or show that you're enrolled in a bachelor's degree program.
There's so many questions to unpack here. First, all those classes are classes that I would deliberately have steered away from when I was in college, and I would still deliberately steer away from. What was it like for you to be going back to school? And I guess you studied psychology, but you weren't certainly in that kind of those kind of subjects in your profession for the last 20 plus years. So what was that all like?
I want to go on record and say I was probably one of the worst college students ever the first time around. I did live at home. It's not like I went away and was just partying all the time. I worked a full-time job, and I just didn't take my degree seriously or the importance that it would have later on in life. I just knew I had to get a degree. That was something that my parents put their foot down about, thankfully. But I skirted by as much as possible, as much as possible. So that was also a curiosity of mine, once I got into my 30s and 40s, like, how good would I do if I were to go back to school and really applied myself now that I see what the value of an education really can be. So I have pleasantly surprised myself, and I have a 4.0 for the first time in my life.
Wow. Well, cheers to that.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Wow.
Thanks. Thanks.
Great work. Lots
Well,
of smiley
especially
faces.
a lot of smiley faces. Yeah. Especially since science has never really been my strong suit. But I loved it. I loved anatomy. I had a great first teacher. And what really surprised me is how much I enjoyed microbiology. I had the best teacher who was so engaging and just made things very relatable. I loved microbiology.
Don't think you would have pictured yourself saying that about 3 years ago, huh?
Never. Never.
And I guess like, and you started, so you just finished your first year of school, and now you've started the next day, which is the 2-year nursing program. Where are you doing academic stuff now, or is that basically like what exactly is that?
So right now I'm in a class called Fundamentals of Nursing, and it's the basics. We're just starting vital signs now, and they're going to teach us everything that we need to know about caring for another individual. I'm also starting my clinical rotations. I'm doing 1 day a week at Bellevue Hospital here in New York City. So the first two, I've only had 2 2 days
Okay.
clinical so far, but the first 2 days were just about getting us oriented on the unit. I'm in a med-surg unit, and
What does that mean?
medical, surgical.
Okay.
So people who've had operations or have medical conditions that require care. It's not an ICU. To be honest, I don't even know if I have the correct language for it. I just know it's med-surg. Talk to me again in 2 years, and I'll be able to tell you.
And I guess what is it like? I mean, so you're studying most of the time, but you're doing the clinical 1 day a week, and there you're kind of like actually like you're doing nursing duties with supervision of another nurse, or what exactly is going on there?
Yes. So I have 1 day of lecture per week. I have 1 day of lab per week at the school. And then I have 1 day of clinical rotation where we have a professor who has a really remarkable career in nursing. And she's our professor for that portion of this course, at least this semester. And she's amazing. She was the director of nursing for communicable diseases on Rikers Island for 14 years. So I feel like I can learn so much from her. And she was also one of the directors of nursing at Elmhurst General Hospital, which, as you know, was one of the real hotspots for COVID a couple of years ago. So she's really seen a lot.
Are you able to share any of the stories that you've heard about what was going on and how they kind of made it? Because one of the things that for me with this podcast is I really wanted to kind of spotlight, everyday people and people in different regions and people in other kind of professions. But I think in particular kind of highlight I think I kind of feel like after the last few years, the backbone of the country are professions that I think frankly people overlook or we take for granted, and certainly nurses. Like trucking. I guess I would throw in there like teachers. And I know there's been lots of troubles, but the police force and the fire department, those are all things that are kind of like foundational to kind of the order of society and kind of the structure of society, and they kind of all were stress tested, and I don't know that society kind of came out of it looking very good as far as how we support all those kind of bedrock professions. So I wanted to make sure that I got to talk to people in each of those different professions, including nursing, especially because of all the, unbelievable stress and pain and suffering that people in the medical field, and in particular, I'm sure the nurses kind of went through. So is there anything that you can share, from what you've heard about what they were going through to get by with just so much craziness going on? And I guess I preface to me, when I look back at the pandemic, I think there are things that seemed very I think one, I like to think I try to have a forgiving mindset in terms of how things were reacted to, because, it was a once in 100 years type thing. And as much as in retrospect, where everybody can be like, well, we should have done this, we should have done that.
Mm-hmm.
The attention span of like the average voter and the average person does not extend that far. So like, I'm trying to be forgiving in that. And I think the other thing that I've been trying to, I guess, kind of come to terms with is just, I didn't come to terms with, but just kind of realize is that we were in the global epicenter of the worst pandemic in 100 plus years. And there are a lot of other areas that were very, very, very far removed from what we were experiencing. So when I guess, try to think about things, I try to, try to at least incorporate into like what my thinking or my feelings about it, to realize that there are just people where the New York City is like on a different planet, and what's happening or what we say is happening might even seem alien. So, I don't think that changes the fact that it was happening, but I think that I've been trying to be more, I guess, understanding of the fact that people perceive things very differently.
Yes.
But I think what you're going to talk about, or if you can talk about it, is like what was actually happening on the ground here, if you can, because that's important to hear.
Unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of stories. I've only at least met her a couple of weeks ago. She hasn't shared that much. But I know from other nurses that I know that they just worked around the clock, and what they had to witness with people, just the overcrowding and people dying. And I think with COVID, people took a turn very quickly. I mean, I know we lost a dear family friend who was improving, and we were optimistic. And then within a matter of hours, he took a turn and was gone. And so at least as far as nurses and medical professionals are concerned, I think that they're all really scarred from that. How do you recover from such an onslaught of loss? And I know that there are a lot of nurses that are retiring, so there's even greater demand for new nurses now. But I also remember that, here in New York, we were outside cheering at 7:00 at night, every night, and playing New York, and trying to support our healthcare workers that way. And I think that extends also to our teachers and other, all frontline personnel. But like you said, our memory is short, and I hope that people remember that, these nurses are still working, and they still have that probably PTSD from what they experienced. So it's not, the pandemic might be waning now. Maybe it's not even a pandemic anymore, but people are still carrying around a lot of baggage from it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine. Is there within the healthcare system, for nurses, is there opportunities or do they provide for therapy? Is that guaranteed or part of becoming a nurse, or is that totally separate? Not
that I've heard, but I would imagine that healthcare benefits would cover that. And if it's not something that's offered, there's no better time to shine a light on that than now. I'm not a nurse yet, so I don't know what all the perks will be. Mm-hmm. So ask me again in 2 years.
Episode 127. Yeah. And then I guess, to me, one of the things, I guess what have you discovered so far in the job that surprised you, either in a good way or a bad way? Just obviously you're just starting to kind of pull the curtain back and see, but what is it that surprised you one way or the other?
I don't know. I think all of it has been a surprise because it's so different than anything I've ever done. There's so much to learn. There's just layers and layers of knowledge that's needed. to be in this field. And I never thought that it would be an easy course of study. But I guess it's kind of like wine. The more you know, or there's always somebody who knows more or needs to know more. So it wasn't really a surprise, but I guess I'm impressed by just how much the depth of the knowledge that people have and how much discipline it takes to get through it. I wouldn't associate the word discipline with myself, but I've had to find that.
Well, I mean, you owned it. You were the owner of a business, so like you definitely figured it out somehow. But this must be like a new context.
Yes, for sure.
So like when you like for. I remember when my mother was sick and she passed away like in 2018. But like, I remember like going to the hospital and just kind of thinking about like you're dealing with like, I mean, in the hospital, there are people there because they're not well, right? I mean, that's why they're there. And it seemed like it could be like kind of a hard context to always be surrounded by people who aren't well. I mean, obviously you're there because you want to help them get better, but that, can't always happen. So, do you like get a feel for like how nurses are able to, like, I guess have extended careers in that kind of context?
Well, I don't know. I can speak to the fact that when I was younger, I worked in the dietary department of a children's hospital, St. Mary's in Bayside, Queens. And a lot of people used to say to me, I don't know how you work there, seeing all those sick kids. And, it must be so depressing. And I was like, it's not, I mean, it has its moments of being depressing, but it wasn't really. It was, you have to remember how much those kids need, actual care, and they don't need sad people being depressed around them all the time. So it can also be very uplifting to be able to help these people. I actually am, people ask me what kind of specialty I might go into in nursing, and this is very preliminary, but I think I might be interested in hospice care. And I don't know. People say, why would you want to do that? You just get surrounded by dying people all the time. But I think it's so important to make sure that people are comfortable, that families understand what's happening. I lost a few family members last year myself. Unfortunately, my father was across the country and I wasn't able to be with him. But the nurse that I spoke to every day on the phone she was a lifesaver for me because she was able to translate what was happening to me in a clear manner. And it was invaluable. And I still remember her. And I would love to be able to do that for somebody else at such a difficult time. And then I lost my godmother, and I saw, a nurse there because I was able to be there with her. There was a nurse there, a hospice care nurse that was just the most calming presence that I could wish for. And she really impressed me as well. So, maybe if I were a 20-something or 30-something going into nursing, I wouldn't want to be surrounded by that kind of environment. But I think I have a different appreciation for it now. And that could all change. Maybe in the next 2 years, I'll find out I really want to be an oncology nurse or pediatric nurse. But right now, the direction might be towards hospice care. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's. Do you find is this a? And I'm going through this myself. Is like, do you find this is something where you're trying to like challenge yourself, add meaning to your life? What's your mindset as you go as you're thinking about what you want to do?
Well, for sure, I wanted to challenge myself. But I feel like I've had a few big acts in my life. I moved to Italy when I was 29, and I lived there on and off for a couple of years. I didn't know the language. It was a big deal for me, and it changed the course of my career. And also with the wine business, I feel like I've had these few big acts, and I've just always felt like I had another one in me. I don't think there'll be another one after this nursing career. I mean, you're in a very similar situation, right? Like you've done a few very different things with your life as well. So I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, no, I think one of the liberating, I don't know if I say liberating, but it kind of changed like at least how to think about like the future and what you're capable of. I was like, our doctor, our general practitioner that we go to, had said, I'm sure he's being overly optimistic here, but he said like, you quite likely could live to 100. And I don't know if he said that before or after he weighed me, but and he took my vitals and stuff. But what I'd say is I think the idea of thinking that like at some point you have to start like kind of a planning to get out of whatever you're doing, or that you're supposed to stop working at a certain point is a very like outdated concept. So for me, I was just like, hey, I'm 50. I still have a mind that I'm sure it doesn't work as fast as when I'm young, but I still feel like kind of actively curious, and it still feels malleable enough to like pursue another career. And I feel like I still have at least enough emotional energy to devote to learning something new. And I don't know, again, I say this to you more, I guess we're just kind of like kindred spirits, but like I found for me, like as I looked at a wine and going back in, I was just like, and it's not to say I wouldn't ever go back, but I just kind of felt like at the point where I left to pursue, what I'm trying to do now with like domestic education travel, was I didn't have enough energy to do the job the way I'd want to. So I needed to at least try this new direction to, if nothing else, say that I tried before I go back. Because if at least I've tried, I might have energy for, returning to what I was doing. And, hopefully I'm successful enough to where it's not that case. But I feel a fresh burst of energy as I pursue this new path, even though it seems like probably insane to a lot of people that a 50-year-old would try to like go into a brand new industry. I feel rejuvenated. And I don't know, are you feeling, it sounds like you're feeling the same way.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the challenge is I have the energy for the challenge. I wasn't feeling challenged for a few years. I struggled after we sold the business and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I knew I needed a challenge. I just didn't know what challenge I needed. So having found it, I definitely get out of bed a little bit more easily. I feel invigorated, and oddly enough, I feel a lot younger because of it. So, yeah. And nursing is one of those careers that it's going to be harder now during school and studying, but it's so diverse that, 10, 15 years from now, I don't have to be doing something where I'm making beds every day, or that's going to be as physically as demanding. There's administrative positions that I could find, home health care, different things that can adjust with my age.
Yeah. And the skills are always needed everywhere. So
sure,
much like wine is needed everywhere.
I know. I will say that I'm a much more popular person because of my wine career than I am my nursing career. But I have a feeling as we get older, that's going to change. Oh, you're a nurse. I need you. For the last 15 years, it's been like, oh, you're in the wine business. I need you.
Yeah. Well, either way, people are probably happy or relieved to see you one way or the other. When I was a lawyer, people were never really happy or relieved to see their lawyer. It was
yeah.
But I guess like to go back a little bit, like, so where did you grow up in the city?
Yes, I am born and raised in Queens, and I'm still in Queens. I was raised out in Bayside, the eastern end of Queens. It's a little less dense. We had driveways and front yards and backyards, and I loved it. I thought it was the best place to grow up. I was 20 minutes away from Manhattan and 20 minutes away from Jones Beach, and it was a really great community. And now I'm in Astoria, and I love it here. I've never lived anywhere else except for Italy. So,
Really?
well, I'm a Queens girl. That doesn't mean I want to stay here for the rest of my life, but this is home.
Yeah, it's funny. Like one of the things, as I've been trying to think about how to like understand the rest of the country, or how people would understand, like say New York City, is that I guess I've been trying to embrace the idea of more like of humility, as far as like knowing that I don't know something and knowing that I don't even know what I don't know, right? And I think that that comes to like people's perception of the city. Even if you like, people who are outside the city get these distorted images through the news, right, about what New York City is. Or through media or through movies, whatever it is, they get some image. And then you live in the city and then you have another image of it. But even like that, even though like I've lived here 25 years, I don't know most of Queens. I don't know much of the Bronx. There's lots of Brooklyn I don't know, and I certainly don't know much about Staten Island. So like, when I think about that, it really kind of, I try to use that to kind of humble what I think I know about almost anything, because I've lived here 25 years, and to be honest, I really don't know that much about New York City, and I don't think you ever could, because it's in a constant state of like flux.
Mm-hmm.
What's kept you in Queens for all your life? What do you like about it so much?
Well, it's so diverse, and there's great ethnic food here. So, I mean, and why would you want to pay Manhattan rents when you could be right on the other side of the water? Um, to be honest, that's not what kept me here. I'm comfortable here.
Mm-hmm.
I I used to work in a restaurant on the east side, Philidia, and I would commute in from Bayside and Douglaston, where I lived, and I would park my car in Astoria and then take the train in. And so I started nosing around here just to see what this neighborhood was like. And this was back in like 2002. And I said, you know what? It's really nice there. And I should look at apartments. And I got very lucky. I found one. I bought it. And it was a smart financial investment for sure. And when I moved in, I said, Astoria, Queens is the new Brooklyn. And it wasn't. And it wasn't at all. But now it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is. I think Queens has really caught up. Astoria and Long Island City, especially, have really boomed. And it just keeps getting better here. So whereas I feel like I've outgrown this studio apartment, I have not outgrown this neighborhood. That's not to say, like I said, I want to stay here for the rest of my life. I would like to have a yard where I can put a dog and have a barbecue, get out of the city a little bit. And that's kind of where travel nursing comes into it, because I don't know exactly where I want to go. And so hopefully I can sign up for a travel nursing gig and go try out a few different places that are of interest to me without having to commit. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That'd be a great way to just kind of like try a pair of shoes on for a little bit and see if they work.
Yep. Little rental program. But you can't really get the feel for a space or for a city until you spend, a couple of months there, I think, at least. So yeah. I do have a few places in mind that I want to explore a little further. Mm-hmm. Greenville, South Carolina, which I know that you were just there, but my niece, Shelby, who is a nurse practitioner, and I have to shout out to her. Mm-hmm. She's in Greenville, and I love it when I go and visit her there. So
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that'll be the next move for me.
Yeah, I think you get very used to the New York City life, and I guess for me, I always feel like when I leave, and what I've been trying to do, and I've probably alluded to in other like episodes, but like, for me, I was, it was just recently where I realized like I'd been to like more of Italy than I've been to the United States, right? I've been to more of like France than the United States. And granted, those are smaller countries, but like, I've just been more all over the place there. And I was like, I want to start learning more about this country. And I think that it is easy. I think sometimes in like looking at other ways that other people live, to either kind of go into it with like complete, like, either just like disdain to start, right? And I think, frankly, I have to plead guilty to being more like, oh, I wouldn't want to go to South Carolina or Ohio or Missouri. I've been that, and I regret that, and I've tried to make amends for being that way. But there's another side too, which is like you go and then you're just enchanted by everything, and you're just like, oh, like New York City sucks. And like what I've been trying to do is like go and like appreciate without necessarily trying to have like, oh, I hate New York City. And I've actually found like that's actually been like a really healthy mindset, because I've seen states and places people live that I had never thought of before, I'd never been to before, and kind of just utterly enchanted by how they live, but still like liking New York. And I think the other part of it, and I guess you would appreciate, I guess you'll know this feeling from like when, from wine, is that when you go to Italy and you're visiting wineries, it's easy to come back like, oh, Italy is so wonderful, it's great, whatever. But the reality is like you were supposed to go feel that way, right? Like you're going there, you're visiting wineries. They want you to go back enchanted and excited and be ready to sell their wines and feel great about it. And you should, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But we come away from those kind of trips with a very, very narrow, very tailored exposure to what Italy is like. So I try to be mindful of like any kind of trip you take, you're only seeing a small sliver of what that place is like. And you can be enchanted by what you see, but you should also, I think, as I said before, kind of be humbled by realizing what you still don't necessarily know. So sometimes when I hear people get frustrated with like our country, I kind of, and they'll talk about some other country and how wonderful it is, right? But it's like, every country has bad things. Like I can't think of any kind of nirvanas out there. It's just when you're on vacation and you're in Paris and you're enjoying, relaxing at a cafe, or you're being a tourist, you should be a tourist and you should come back feeling great. But don't come back thinking that the French have it all figured out, because you haven't actually lived like a French person. No different than if somebody comes to New York City and goes to the Empire State Building and to the MoMA and to Broadway and eats at a nice Michelin star restaurant and then says, "Oh, New York City is so wonderful." It's like, no, there's a lot of problems with New York City too,
which New Yorkers never do. Remind you, like New Yorkers don't go to the Empire State Building or go to Times Square. But I get your point. I don't know. I lived in Italy for a couple of years and straight, and they do kind of have it figured out. But
you just blew my whole theory out of the water now.
I think it might have something to do with where I was in Italy. I was in Florence, and I was working in Tuscany a little bit, and just the pace is so different. It's just, I wasn't raising a family, and there were a lot of things that I still didn't have to deal with, but I had more time in my day. The priorities are different. Mm-hmm. I do think they've got something figured out that we haven't, but I'm sure they would argue that, that we've got something they don't have.
Yeah. Well, I think like when I lived in Japan for 3 years, I think the one part of it, like living as like an expat versus like living like there as like a citizen, is that like everything was like really fascinating and curious, and like there were stuff like, at least for me, and I wasn't speaking Japanese fluently, and it sounds like you were fluent. I mean, if I recall correctly, you're fluent in Italian. Is you were probably more like kind of integrated into the community, but I felt a certain like detachment, and I think that like news about the United States hits me more viscerally than news in Japan could have hit me when I was living in Japan, because it's my country. And I don't know if did you feel like a certain sense of detachment because you weren't there, or did you find yourself really becoming like an Italian?
Well, no, I didn't feel like I was becoming an Italian. Very few Italians spoke Italian to me. I don't know if that's because I have this like apple pie face, or it was because I was in Florence and maybe they were trying to practice their English on me, or I don't know. But I didn't feel like I was becoming Italian. And because I was in Florence, I associated more with Americans than I did with Italians. The Florentines really kind of keep to themselves because there's just constantly this influx of, transient people just looking for their own personal renaissance. Guilty as charged.
You found it for a good 2 decades,
yeah,
right?
I found it. Yes, I found it. But to your point about being detached, I was living in Italy when, no, I'm sorry, I was in Budapest when the Columbine murders happened. And I have never longed to be in America more than I did that day. It was so difficult to be away.
Yeah. So did you know Italian when you went there, or did you
No.
did you learn it on the ground?
I knew nothing.
Really?
I knew nothing. I kind of, I don't know. I took a conversational course at a community college before I went, and they taught me how to say ciao and buongiorno and all these ridiculous things that I would have learned in 30 minutes over there. But no, because I didn't know anything, I signed up for Italian lessons right away in a small school that, I started studying and I loved it. I loved studying Italian and I really did well with it. And I didn't intend to continue studying, but I did because I enjoyed it so much. And then, of course, as I moved home and I was working, like I said, at Felidia with Lydia Bastianich, I got to use my Italian a little bit more here than I expected. And then, of course, with the Italian wine importing business, I used it all the time. We had Italians coming here. I had to write emails. I had to have phone conversations, negotiations. I use my Italian a lot. And sadly, I don't use it that much anymore. So I know it would all come back to me, but I don't use it as much as I should now.
Do they do visiting nurse programs to Italy?
Don't think it's not on my list of things. Medicine is medicine. They're gonna need nurses over there at some point. So I will investigate that. If there's an international program, I would love that. When we talk about worlds colliding, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I guess there are probably some communities in New York City where maybe they could use you too.
I don't speak Italian American. I don't speak Italian American. I speak Italian. I think there's a big difference.
When I guess there was a fleeting moment where I was thinking in like a foreign language and that quickly passed. Like when did that start happening to you, and how hard did you have to work to get there, and what was that like when you're like, oh my God, I'm not thinking in English?
Well, I think that happened on various levels. I remember the first time I was able to tell a joke in Italian and somebody laughed at the punchline. It felt like the best. It was the best feeling to be able to convey humor in a different language. And it took a few months before, and again, it's all relative. The more you learn, the more there is to learn. But after, 6 months, I guess, a year, I was a lot more comfortable, and I was thinking in Italian. And that didn't really go away, even when we had the business. I was still thinking and dreaming in Italian.
Wow.
Yeah, it just happens, right? You don't consciously do it. It just happens. Mm-hmm. It's really neat. If you haven't studied, for whoever's watching, if you haven't studied another language, fully encourage you to do so. It's a great challenge, and I feel like I'm learning another language now with all this medical terminology. I'm calling upon some of the skills that I learned in order to learn all the stuff that I'm talking about now with anatomy and medicine. So,
wow. What, I guess, when you were like, what was it that was so enchanting about Florence and Tuscany where you're living? I mean, there's like the caricature, like what you'd expect. Is it that, or what was it that kind of like, what was so lovely about it?
Well, I was originally drawn to it because I had never been there, and I didn't really have a plan. When I was in my 20s, I worked for a hotel in Manhattan, the Roger Smith Hotel, and they used to bring over European interns, mostly from Spain and Sweden and Ireland, and I went to visit them. So I wound up traveling by myself quite a bit over to Europe, and when I was ready to leave the hotel, I said, you know what, I think I want to go and get my certification in teaching English as a second language. And so I kind of looked at the map and I said, I've never been to Italy and I would like to experience it in a different way than just, a vacation. So I said, well, what's central? What's central in Italy? Where could I be well situated to travel around the country? And that was Florence. But I'm not the type of person to do a lot of preparations. I literally arrived there. You might understand the problem with this. I arrived there in the second week of August in 1999. And I thought I was going to, find a job and find an apartment and get myself all situated in the middle of August in Italy. There was nobody there. Like literally everywhere I went, there was a sign, chiuso per feria, closed for the holiday. And I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And that was part of the reason I went to the school to say, maybe I should take some lessons and build up a little bit of a network here. Turned out to be the right move. But Florence, maybe if I were to do it again, I would go to Bologna, which is also centrally located, fewer Americans, even more beautiful possibly than Florence. Bologna is incredible. But, I'm not complaining. Florence was a great experience. I lived there twice, actually. I lived there in 99 to 2000, and I went back again in 2006 to try and do it a different way. And I studied photography for a little while, and just, another one of those personal renaissances.
That would have been a nice get, a photography career in Italy.
I learned that I am not a photographer. I'm not a good photographer. When it comes to manual equipment, it's not my thing.
Yeah. Well, I think getting into the Italian wine business from that is quite a successful pivot as well. If photography wasn't going to work out,
for me, it was really important to work with Italy, and that's all I ever wanted. And that's what led me to Lydia Bastianich and Felidia. And when I was there, that's when I met my former business partner, David Weitzenhofer. And, it was his idea and he just needed help doing it. So I kind of piggybacked. He was the wine personality and I was the logistics person, the language person. So it was a great combination, and it was, but prior to meeting him, I could have been working, for a chocolate company or Ferrari or just anything that linked me to Italy would have scratched that same itch for me. But yeah. I'm happy it was wine. I'm happy the way it worked out. I met the most wonderful people.
Yeah.
Yourself included.
Thank you. Likewise, so did I. No, it's the wine profession is something where it felt the entire time like it's a profession where you get to play. Like it's basically like grown up recreation. You're getting paid for it. Like that's your job, is wine all the time. Like you're thinking about wine, you're tasting wine, you're meeting people from different countries, even different parts of this country. And it was an exhilarating 12 years to be and you guys were definitely, as we were talking, I remember the energy that I felt lacking recently in my last, year in wine was, I would compare that to what I felt like, going to the Acid Inc. office. And I'm going from the subway station, the G train station. And I think I had my scooter at the time. And I just I was the scooter riding former lawyer wine salesman and to my clients, but like just feeling that energy of excitement about getting out there and like being so grateful for having that opportunity. And it was, I think, after the pandemic, I don't know, that energy wasn't there, but it was there for the time I was with Acid Inc. with you and David. And that was, a pretty special, singular experience was being a part of all that was happening while I was working for you guys. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. We had a really good thing going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and it was also to me, there was lots of insights there about our connectivity with people and through food. And, the thing that I've been trying to lead with now and trying to understand, America has been the idea of curiosity, and kind of really leading that with any engagement, whether it's, trying to learn about people, communities, states, regions, whatever. And I think that comes from wine because there's just an overwhelming amount of information in the wine world. And I never did that job to make money. I did that job because I just wanted to do right by the wineries and by my clients. And I always assumed that if I did right by them, the money would follow. But there's still a lot of information to know. But I found when you just go at it with curiosity and with openness and excitedness, it became not overwhelming, but just endlessly invigorating.
Yeah. And I think you also are onto something. There's so many different regions within Italy, right? And everybody kind of expects that the cuisine is going to be different and the wine is going to be different and the dialect is going to be different when you go from region to region in Italy. But I don't think that people assume that about America. And as we go state to state, of course, we think about Southern food or, lobster in New England, maybe Tex-Mex food, but I love what you've been doing with, is it grits and all the different ways to make them, and just kind of spotlighting and highlighting American cuisine and ingredients that way. It's cool.
No, thank you. It's been fun, and it is coming to understand Italy it's been helpful to apply that kind of mindset back to this country because, from the outside looking in, Italy is just a monolith. It's Italy, right? I mean, before I got into the wine world, I didn't know any better. I didn't even know where Chianti was or Barolo or any place else was. Mm-hmm. But then I realized to understand Italy, you had to understand that it wasn't monolithic. It was just a bunch of different kingdoms that kind of were cobble, and this is subject to what but my understanding was it's kind of a bunch of different kingdoms cobbled together, and you've got the southern Italian part, which is almost connected in some respects to Greece or the Mediterranean because obviously the water, and then you have central Italy, and then you have the French Italy, and then you have the Swiss Italy, and then you have the Germanic Italy. But what I found interesting in even learning about the Germanic part of Italy, which is obviously, as Trentino Alto Adige, and was that there's the Germanic part where they speak German, and then there's the Germanic part where they speak Italian. So you realize that everything has kind of nuance and everything has difference. And when I apply that idea back to the United States, it starts making more sense to realize that there's so much variation even within the Italian culture. That certainly applies here. There's just a lot of variation in the United States, and it's such a bigger country than Italy. So how could it not have even more variation?
Yeah. No, and I've really enjoyed watching, your travels, and especially your group trip with the teenagers to show them, what it's like to maybe spend a little time in a different state, and I really enjoyed that.
Well, I mean, thank you. And it was, and I think, and that was mirrored off of actually our wine trips. Like, because what I realized when, like, you and David, going with you and David and Burke, and I forget who else, like, that was all about, like, just being personable and just being, like, endlessly curious.
Yes,
That's what
curious.
those trips were about. Like, you're not there to be led around. You're there to learn. You're there, and not only there to learn, but you showed respect by being curious. If you weren't asking questions, you were wasting their time.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and if nothing, and you weren't picking up information to then represent them in a better way. So it's that kind of, it's the practical aspects of curiosity I saw as well, but also just the energy that came from being curious. So again, back to you, Laura. Thank you. And thank you to David and Burke.
Yeah, no,
So,
I mean, you're right. We traveled really, really well there. And, a lot of it was because the wonderful hosts that we had. But you're right. We needed to be curious. We needed to understand microclimate and the cuisines, the hyper local cuisine sometimes. If you go to Barolo, they have different dishes there in Piedmont that everybody's, they make their tagliatelle this way, or, the vitello tonato that way. It does a disservice to not be curious about places like that, and here as well.
Yeah. It was, I think the fun thing is, like, I don't look back and it doesn't sound like you either, at least to me, is like, I feel like I'm grateful for that experience. And if I had to go back, I'd, be, I would be delighted that I could consider that something to go back to. But I don't look back at it yearningly. I look back at it more as, like, appreciative of how many building blocks that gave me to become the person that I am now. And in fact, like, I would say, of all the different things that I've done, I think being in the Navy was very formative. But I think my 12 years in wine, I think, gave me a lot more practical insights into, I don't know, being a human being, and just life and business than what I learned certainly as a lawyer, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that comes with age as well.
Yeah.
Right. And just life has a way of teaching you a lot of lessons about interacting with other humans, and certainly owning a business taught me a lot, a lot about hard work and respecting other people's efforts. A lot of lessons. I try not to say that I was lucky to do that, because I worked my butt off. And it didn't happen because of luck. But I was very fortunate to, spend so much time in that industry and live in Italy as well. I made it happen, so I wasn't lucky, but I was very fortunate.
Yeah. So as you look forward, you mentioned that there were a couple of different, like, things that you were thinking about. So for somebody in your stage of, like, the infancy of your nursing career, like, what are either for you particularly, what is possible? Like, what would you want to do? But maybe more generally for anybody who's in your shoes, like, what are the different things that somebody could do in the nursing world? Like, because the only thing I picture is, like, okay, you work at a hospital. I have no idea what else you do.
Well, a quick story. My niece, like I said, she's a nurse practitioner, and before any of this was even an idea in my mind, when she decided she wanted to stop working nights in the hospital, I was like, I can understand why you don't want to work nights, but I don't understand, why do you want to work in a hospital? What are you going to go work in a doctor's office? And I was like, is that better? And she was like, the hospital's the pits. I think they're more overworked, and I think there are certainly cushier jobs in the field. And it's not that she's working in a doctor's office now, but she is in like an allergy practice. And she's a nurse practitioner, so she's working on a completely different level. But there's also administrative, like discharge nursing, that I haven't really fully investigated. So I don't want to talk about, like, I don't know what to say, but I do know people that, it's more of a desk job. So, so you're not at bedside as much, and there's home health care where I think you can just go to people's homes and check in on them, make sure they're doing well, taking their meds, taking their vitals. That's my impression. It's so diverse. There's school nursing, of course. I'm sure there's lots of other possibilities. While travel nursing, I say that I want to do that, but I think it's not because of the type of nursing that you do. It's because of the location that's appealing to me. I think you might wind up in the ICU a lot, or the emergency room or something, and I'm dreading any kind of emergency room situation. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Ooh. And
I'm dreading
do you have so when you get assigned to a hospital, I mean, if somebody does that, are there specialties, or is it just like you could be assigned to any particular anywhere? What is that? Do you know how that works?
I'm not sure. I think that you probably could be, you could say I'm a specialist in OBGYN or pediatrics or oncology. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the agencies will look for those kind of specialties and place you where needed, but I think they might also just stick you where you needed.
Okay. So, wow.
But it all needs to be, I have to learn all about that still. I gotta get through the course of study before I, really focus on that. But I should do what you do and interview more people and find out exactly the process that lies ahead.
Well, somebody had said to me, like, when I was first thinking about this idea, is he said, like, if you do a podcast, don't do it for don't do it for followers or for views or listens or whatever, because most people aren't going to get that. So just do it because you're having conversations. It's almost like you're recording your networking, I guess, is kind of at least the way I said it. Is like more like you're building a community with each person you talk to. So yeah, maybe you should do it. We can talk offline about how to start your own podcast.
I have no bandwidth. For any of that anymore. I am stretched to the max. And I haven't fully gotten out of the wine business myself yet. I'm still in it. I have to shout out to my current employers that are actually really, really wonderful. I'm working with MS Walker, and I'm part-time. I'm remote when I need to be, and they've been very supportive, understanding that my schooling, my studies is my current priority, but I have to work. That's the reality of my situation. I have to work, and they've been really, really supportive. So I don't know how I would be doing this if I wasn't working for them. Before them, I was working for an events company that, the pay wasn't great. And I had to travel to different gigs. And, it was also really physically demanding. And, I don't think that would have been sustainable. So the wine industry is still coming through for me.
That's great. It's hard to find an employer that would be that could be that. I would say good heart isn't the right word, but kind of have their mind and their heart in the right place. So good on MS Walker.
Yes, good on them. The timing worked out perfectly for me there.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like you've got a calendar full of things, I'm sure, to take care of today. So we should probably wrap up. I guess, but before I wrap up, as with everybody else, I always like to ask, what gives you hope at the end of the day?
I would have to say the younger generation. I am studying with a lot of younger people. Not everybody in my cohort is younger, but the majority of people are, in their late 20s. And, I think I never get the names of the generations right. I think we're Gen X and they're Gen Z. They're not millennials, really. But I think there's this myth of us clashing and not having anything in common. But I have such respect for a lot of the students that I'm studying with and their determination and their priorities. Really, really give me hope. And they treat me like one of their own. I think I'm more concerned with my age than they are. They've never treated me as the old lady in the cohort or anything. I was kind of afraid of that, as anyone would be. But they've never made me feel that way. And they have dreams and goals, clearer than what I had when I was their age. So, and just my nieces and, the younger kids I know, I'm so impressed by them. So, and they're not always on their phone, and they're there's all these myths that we have or that we think about them. It's just not true.
That's really nice to hear and assuring, and hopefully we can all do our part to kind of make sure they get to inherit a country and a world in better shape than the last few years.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Laura, thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a pleasure to have an excuse to kind of have this kind of extended talk with you. So thank you.
No, thank you. And call me back in a couple of years. Of course, we'll talk more before then, but I'd love to do this again after I've actually gotten through nursing school and I can maybe answer some of your questions a little bit better. But to be continued, this conversation.
Yeah, no, that would be great. We'll
we'll
revisit. Episode 27B.
Yeah, there you go.
A couple of years. So, all right. Well, thank you again, and thank you to our listeners, and may you all go out and explore our country with curiosity, respect, and compassion. Thank you.